The stars looked different from the bridge of the UES Indomitable as it moved through the dark space near the edge of human territory. Commander Hyunwoo Park stood with his hands behind his back, watching the endless black through the main screen. He had been doing this job for 10 years now and still found peace in the quiet moments between patrols. His dark uniform carried the marks of many battles, small tears that the repair crews could fix but somehow never did completely. The ship around him hummed with the sound of 300 crew members going about their daily work. So-Min Lee sat at her station running checks on the tactical systems. She was young for an officer at only 25 but had proven herself in 3 major conflicts already. Her fingers moved across the control panels with practiced speed as she monitored the surrounding space for any signs of trouble. The scanner showed empty space in all directions, just the way they liked it during routine patrols. Woo Jin Kim worked in the engine room below, making sure the massive power systems kept running smoothly. He wiped sweat from his face as he checked the plasma conduits that fed energy to every system on the ship. The engines were old but reliable, much like Woo Jin himself. At 42, he was one of the oldest crew members aboard and had served on 6 different ships during his career. He knew every sound the engines made and could tell when something was wrong just by listening. Yoonji Choi stood in the weapons bay, running her daily inspection of the missile systems and energy cannons. She took her job seriously because she knew that when trouble came, the crew would depend on her weapons to keep them alive. The weapons were human-made, solid and dependable, but not the most advanced in the galaxy. Still, they had served the human fleet well in past conflicts with pirates and raiders. The Crimson Fleet consisted of 300 ships spread across this sector of space, each one patrolling assigned routes to protect the human colonies scattered throughout dozens of star systems. Most of the ships were older vessels that had been upgraded over the years, but they were crewed by experienced people who knew their business. The fleet had faced pirates, smugglers, and the occasional hostile alien scout, but nothing that posed a real threat to human space. Hyunwoo was reviewing patrol reports when So-Min suddenly stiffened at her station. Her scanner screen began showing readings that made no sense. The computer was detecting massive energy signatures approaching from deep space, far beyond anything they had encountered before. "Commander," So-Min called out, her voice steady despite what she was seeing. "I have multiple contacts approaching our position. The computer says there are over 5,000 ships." Hyunwoo turned from his position and walked to her station. He looked at the readings and felt his stomach drop. The numbers were impossible. No fleet in known space contained that many vessels. Even the largest human battle groups rarely exceeded 50 ships. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensors," Hyunwoo ordered. "Check for system errors or interference." So-Min worked quickly, running every test she could think of. The results came back clean. The sensors were working perfectly, which meant the readings were real. Over 5,000 ships were heading directly toward their position at incredible speed. Throughout the ship, other crew members began to notice something was wrong. Woo Jin felt the engines vibrate in a way he had never experienced before. Some kind of massive gravitational field was affecting the ship's systems. In the weapons bay, Yoonji watched as her targeting computers began picking up energy signatures that were off the scale. "Commander," So-Min reported, "the lead ships are now visible on long-range sensors. They are unlike anything in our database." The main screen flickered and then showed the approaching fleet. Hyunwoo stared at ships that seemed to be made of flowing metal, their surfaces shifting and changing as they moved through space. Each vessel was easily 3 times the size of the Indomitable, and they moved with a coordination that suggested advanced computer control or some kind of shared intelligence. "Send an immediate message to fleet headquarters," Hyunwoo ordered. "Tell them we have encountered an unknown alien fleet of unprecedented size. Request immediate backup and orders." As So-Min sent the message, the alien fleet continued to approach. Within minutes, they had reached the outer edge of the human patrol zone. The lead ship, larger than any vessel in human space, moved ahead of the others and began transmitting a signal. The communication came through in perfect human language. Though the voice that spoke the words was unlike anything they had heard before, it seemed to come from multiple sources speaking in perfect unity, creating an eerie harmony that made several crew members uncomfortable. "Human vessels," the voice said. You will identify yourselves and state your purpose in this region of space. Hyunwoo took a deep breath and activated the communication system. This is Commander Hyunwoo Park of the United Earth ship Indomitable. You are entering human-controlled space. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came quickly. We are the Velthari Empire. This region of space now belongs to us. You will order all human ships to withdraw immediately, or face the consequences. So-min checked her readings again. The alien fleet had formed a perfect sphere around the human patrol ships, cutting off any chance of escape. Each alien vessel showed energy readings that suggested weapons far more powerful than anything in the human arsenal. I do not have the authority to order a withdrawal from human space, Hyunwoo replied. If you wish to negotiate, you will need to speak with our government representatives. The alien voice responded with what might have been laughter, though it sounded more like machinery breaking down. There will be no negotiation with primitive species. You have one choice: surrender immediately or be destroyed. To demonstrate their point, the largest alien ship powered up a weapon system that made the space around it glow with barely contained energy. The beam that emerged was pure white light that reached out and touched a large asteroid floating in space nearby. The asteroid, which was over a mile wide, simply vanished. There was no explosion, no debris field, just empty space where solid rock had existed moments before. The crew of the Indomitable watched in stunned silence. Woo Jin felt the ship's sensors overload from the energy discharge. Yoonji realized that her weapons would be useless against technology that could erase matter from existence. So-min ran calculations and discovered that the aliens could destroy every human ship in the patrol fleet without even slowing down. You have witnessed our power, the alien voice continued. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your ships cannot escape us. You will order all human forces to abandon this region of space within 24 Earth hours, or we will demonstrate our capabilities on your colonies. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Hyunwoo looked around at his crew and saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. These were people who had chosen to serve in the deep space fleet, knowing they might face unknown dangers. So-min, send another message to headquarters, Hyunwoo said quietly. Tell them we need every available ship and our best strategic minds. We have 24 hours to figure out how to fight something that can erase us from existence. As the EE message went out, the alien fleet maintained its position around the human ships, a constant reminder of the impossible situation they faced. The Velthari had technology that seemed centuries ahead of human capabilities, overwhelming numbers and apparently no interest in peaceful coexistence. Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of his ship, surrounded by an enemy fleet that could destroy him with a thought, and tried to figure out how humanity could possibly survive the next day. The stars no longer looked peaceful. They looked like the lights that would shine on humanity's grave if he could not find an answer to an impossible problem. The emergency meeting aboard the command ship UES Sovereign brought together every senior military officer within communication range. Admiral Tae-ho Yoon sat at the head of the conference table, his weathered face showing the stress of commanding humanity's defense against an impossible enemy. Around him sat the finest military minds in human space, but their combined experience seemed inadequate against the threat they now faced. General Young-suk Nam had arrived from the Mars Defense Command just hours earlier, her transport ship pushing its engines to the breaking point to reach the meeting on time. She had spent 30 years defending human colonies from various threats, but nothing in her experience compared to the Velthari fleet. Her tactical knowledge covered every known form of space combat, but the aliens had demonstrated technology that made conventional warfare meaningless. Fleet Captain Min Ho-jang commanded the 2nd Battle Group, the largest collection of warships in human space. His ships were the newest and most powerful humanity had built, equipped with the latest weapons and defensive systems. Yet after seeing the recording of the asteroid destruction, he knew his entire fleet would last mere minutes against the alien technology. The holographic display in the center of the table showed the current tactical situation. 5,000 alien ships maintained their position around the human patrol fleet, while additional Velthari forces had been detected approaching 3 major human colonies. The aliens were not just threatening the military, they were positioning themselves to attack civilian populations. "We have 16 hours remaining," Admiral Tejo announced to the group. "Our fastest ships need 12 hours to reach the closest colony worlds, which means we have very little time to develop a strategy that can work against an enemy with overwhelming technological superiority." General Youngsuk studied the tactical display and ran calculations in her head. Even if they gathered every human warship from across known space, they would still be outnumbered 10-1. The size difference between human and alien vessels made the situation even worse, as each enemy ship appeared to carry the firepower of an entire human battle group. "What do we know about their capabilities?" Fleet Captain Minho asked. Admiral Tejo activated another display showing the analysis of the alien weapon that had destroyed the asteroid. "Our scientists estimate that their primary weapons operate by disrupting atomic bonds. Essentially, they can unmake matter at the subatomic level. Our armor and shields are useless against this technology." The room fell silent as the officers absorbed this information. Military doctrine was based on the assumption that enemy weapons could be defended against through better armor or more powerful shields. An weapon that could simply erase its target made all defensive preparations meaningless. Dr. Hei In-song entered the conference room carrying a data pad filled with her research findings. She was the head of the Human Xenobiology Institute and had spent years studying alien species encountered during humanity's expansion into space. Her work had helped establish peaceful relations with 6 different alien civilizations, but the Velthari were unlike anything she had studied before. "I have analyzed their communication patterns and ship movement data," Dr. Hayen reported. "The Velthari appear to operate as a collective consciousness rather than individual beings. Every ship in their fleet moves with perfect coordination, suggesting they share a single controlling intelligence." General Youngsuk leaned forward with interest. "What are the tactical implications of a hive mind?" "Perfect coordination means no communication delays or misunderstood orders," Dr. Hayen explained. "But it also means they cannot adapt to unexpected situations as quickly as individual commanders making independent decisions. Their entire species appears to think in patterns that prioritize efficiency and logical outcomes." Admiral Tejo studied this information carefully. "Are you suggesting they might have difficulty dealing with unpredictable tactics?" "Exactly," Dr. Hayen confirmed. "Every successful species they have conquered appears to have used conventional military strategies based on logical deployment of forces. They have never faced an enemy that uses random or seemingly illogical tactical decisions." While the senior officers discussed strategy, Captain Donghyun Bae was preparing his stealth ship UES Phantom for a reconnaissance mission deep into enemy territory. The Phantom was an experimental vessel designed for covert operations, equipped with advanced sensor systems and the ability to avoid detection by most known scanning methods. If anyone could get close enough to study the alien fleet without being detected, it would be Donghyun and his crew. The stealth ship slipped away from the human fleet and began its approach toward the alien formation. Donghyun had volunteered for the mission knowing it was likely suicide, but the information they gathered might save millions of human lives. His sensors began picking up detailed readings of the alien vessels as he moved closer. What he discovered changed everything. The alien ships were not just coordinated, they were directly controlled by a single massive vessel at the center of the formation. Every movement, every weapon discharge, every tactical decision flowed from this central command ship to the rest of the fleet through some kind of instantaneous communication system. "Command, this is Phantom." Donghyun transmitted using a tight beam communication system that would be difficult for the aliens to detect. "I have located what appears to be their fleet command center. It is a massive vessel, approximately 10 kilometers in length, positioned at the exact center of their formation. All other ships appear to be receiving direct control signals from this central unit." Back on the Sovereign, this information sparked intense discussion among the military commanders. If the aliens operated through centralized control, destroying or disrupting their command ship might cripple their entire fleet. However, reaching the center of a formation defended by 5,000 warships would require sacrificing most of the human fleet. Meanwhile, Engineer Bora Kim was working frantically in the research facilities aboard the orbital shipyard near Earth. She had been given access to every experimental technology project in development, with orders to find anything that might help even the odds against the aliens. Most human weapons were based on kinetic energy or conventional explosives, neither of which would be effective against alien defensive systems. However, Bo-Ra had been working on experimental plasma core modifications that could theoretically increase weapon power by several 100%. The technology was highly unstable and had never been tested in actual combat conditions. Installing the modifications would require removing most of the safety systems from human warships, creating a significant risk that the ships would destroy themselves before engaging the enemy. "Admiral," Bo-Ra reported over the communication system, "I can modify our ships to generate plasma bursts powerful enough to potentially damage alien vessels. However, the modifications are extremely dangerous. Any ship using this technology will have a significant chance of suffering catastrophic system failure." Admiral Tejo considered this information alongside everything else they had learned. The humans were facing an enemy with superior numbers, superior technology, and what appeared to be perfect tactical coordination. Their only advantages were the unpredictability that came from individual decision-making and the willingness to take risks that a logical hive mind might not anticipate. "Begin immediate installation of the plasma modifications on all available ships," Admiral Tejo ordered. "Also prepare detailed tactical plans based on the assumption that our commanders will operate independently without centralized coordination. We are going to show these aliens that humans do not fight the way they expect." As the orders went out across human space, thousands of people began preparing for a battle that would determine the survival of their species. Engineers worked around the clock installing dangerous modifications to weapon systems. Pilots practiced combat maneuvers that violated every principle of conventional space warfare. Scientists analyzed every piece of data about the aliens, looking for any weakness that could be exploited. The Velthari fleet maintained its position, confident in their technological superiority, and apparently unaware that the humans were preparing something unprecedented. Their hive mind calculated that the primitive species would either surrender or be easily destroyed when the deadline expired. They had conquered 17 other civilizations using the same approach, and they saw no reason why the humans would be different. But humanity had something the Velthari had never encountered before: the chaotic creativity that came from billions of individual minds, each capable of making decisions that defied logical analysis. The aliens were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that refuses to follow the rules of engagement. The final hours before the alien deadline passed like minutes as human ships across the galaxy prepared for what many believed would be their last battle. Commander Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, now equipped with the experimental plasma modifications that made his engines glow with dangerous energy. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had accepted that they might die but were determined to make their deaths count for something. The human fleet had grown to nearly 300 ships as every available vessel answered the call for reinforcements. They were still vastly outnumbered, but Admiral Tejo had developed a strategy that played to humanity's greatest strength: the unpredictability that came from individual commanders making split-second decisions without waiting for orders from a central authority. War Commander Thex Valor observed the human preparations from his position aboard the Velthari command vessel. His consciousness was connected to every ship in the fleet, allowing him to see through thousands of sensors simultaneously and coordinate the actions of his entire force as if it were a single organism. He had used this same approach to conquer 17 different species, and the pattern was always the same. The enemy would mass their forces, attempt a conventional attack, and be destroyed by the superior firepower and perfect coordination of the Velthari fleet. The humans appeared to be following the same predictable pattern. Their ships were gathering, in formation, preparing what looked like a standard military assault. Thexvaler calculated that the battle would last approximately 12 minutes, after which the human fleet would be completely destroyed and their colonies would surrender, rather than face the same fate. But Thexvaler and the Velthari hive mind had made a critical error in their analysis. They were judging human tactics based on the behavior of species that thought collectively, like themselves. They did not understand that each human ship was commanded by an individual who could make decisions that contradicted overall strategy, if they believed it would give them an advantage. Lieutenant Sujin Park sat in the cockpit of her modified fighter, part of a squadron of 24 small vessels that had been designated as the first wave of the human attack. Her orders were simple: create as much confusion as possible in the alien formation while the larger ships prepared their main assault. However, Sujin had studied the alien movement patterns during the waiting period and had developed her own ideas about how to maximize the effectiveness of her attack. When the battle began, Sujin did not follow the planned attack route. Instead, she led her squadron in a series of seemingly random maneuvers that brought them at the alien fleet from 6 different directions simultaneously. Her fighters spread out across a volume of space that made it impossible for the Velthari to predict where the next attack would come from. Thex Valor found this behavior puzzling. Military logic dictated that small fighters should concentrate their attack on a single target to maximize damage, but the humans were dividing their force and attacking multiple targets with reduced effectiveness. It seemed like a waste of resources that would accomplish nothing except getting the fighters destroyed more quickly. But as Sujin's squadron continued their assault, something unexpected happened. The Velthari ships began having difficulty coordinating their defensive response because they could not predict where the next attack would originate. The hive mind was designed to process information and make decisions based on logical patterns, but the human fighters were not following any logical pattern that could be analyzed. When one of Sujin's wingmen was shot down, she did not retreat or call for support as military doctrine suggested. Instead, she used the explosion of his ship as cover to approach an alien vessel from an angle that its weapons could not cover. Her plasma-enhanced weapons punched through the alien ship's shields and caused significant damage before she was forced to retreat. This success was noted by the other human pilots, who began improvising their own variations on Sujin's tactics. Soon, the entire first wave was attacking in a completely chaotic pattern that made it impossible for the Velthari to develop an effective counter-strategy. Captain Jaewon Choi commanded the second wave of the human attack, consisting of 30 medium-sized warships equipped with the most dangerous version of the plasma modifications. His ships had been stripped of most defensive systems to make room for the enhanced weapons, making them extremely vulnerable, but giving them the firepower to potentially damage alien vessels. Jaewon had been ordered to support the fighter attack by engaging alien ships that were focused on Sujin's squadron. However, he realized that the plasma modifications had created an unexpected opportunity. The enhanced weapons were so unstable that they could be deliberately overloaded to create explosions far more powerful than any conventional weapon in the human arsenal. All ships prepare for ramming speed, Jaewon announced to his squadron. His order was met with silence as his captains processed what he was suggesting. Deliberate ramming attacks had not been used in space warfare for over a century, because they required sacrificing your own ship to damage the enemy. But Jaewon understood something that the aliens did not. Human commanders were willing to sacrifice themselves if it meant protecting their families and colonies. The Velthari hive mind could not comprehend this concept because it valued the preservation of resources above all other considerations. The second wave ships accelerated toward the alien formation at maximum speed, their plasma cores pushed beyond safe operating limits. As they approached their targets, the human crews overloaded their weapon systems and rammed their ships directly into alien vessels. The resulting explosions were visible from hundreds of kilometers away as the unstable plasma cores released all their energy at once. Thex Valor watched in horror as 30 alien ships were destroyed or severely damaged by attacks that made no logical sense. The humans were deliberately destroying their own vessels to damage his fleet, demonstrating a disregard for efficient resource management that the hive mind found incomprehensible. While the first 2 waves created chaos in the alien formation, Dr. Haein Song was implementing her own contribution to the battle plan. She had discovered that the Velthari communication system operated on specific frequencies that could be disrupted by transmitting chaotic audio patterns. From her position aboard a specially modified ship, she began broadcasting a mixture of human music, laughter, conversation, and random noise directly into the alien communication network. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Velthari hive mind was designed to process organized information efficiently, but the random human sounds created a form of sensory overload that disrupted their ability to coordinate fleet movements. Individual alien ships began responding, more slowly to commands as their collective consciousness struggled to filter out the chaotic interference. Command. This is Dr. Song, Hi-In reported. The audio interference is having a significant effect on their coordination. I recommend all ships broadcast similar patterns on all frequencies. Within minutes, every human ship was transmitting recordings of human voices, music, and other sounds that created a cacophony of noise across the communication spectrum. The Velthari fleet, which had operated with perfect unity for thousands of years, suddenly found itself struggling to maintain basic coordination. Commander Hyunwoo led the third wave of the attack, consisting of the largest and most heavily armed ships in the human fleet. Unlike the previous waves, his objective was not to create confusion, but to break through the alien defensive perimeter and reach the central command vessel that Captain Dong-hyun had identified. The journey to the center of the alien formation would require fighting through hundreds of enemy ships, each one capable of destroying any human vessel with a single shot. However, the chaos created by the earlier attacks had disrupted the aliens' perfect defensive coordination, creating gaps in their formation that a skilled commander could exploit. Hyunwoo's ship moved through the alien fleet like a fish swimming upstream, using the confusion and communication problems to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. Around him, other human ships followed similar tactics, each commander making independent decisions about the best route to take based on their immediate situation. The Velthari had never faced an enemy that operated without centralized coordination. They could not predict human movements because there was no single command authority making decisions that could be analyzed. Every human ship was commanded by an individual who could change tactics instantly based on developing circumstances, as Ryu. The human fleet fought its way deeper into the alien formation. The cost in lives and ships was enormous. Over half the human vessels had been destroyed or severely damaged, but the survivors continued to advance toward their target. Each loss only seemed to make the remaining crews more determined to reach the enemy command ship. Thexa Valor realized that his perfect tactical system was failing against an enemy that refused to follow the rules of logical warfare. For the first time in his species' history, the Velthari were facing defeat, despite having overwhelming technological and numerical superiority. The humans had found a way to turn their greatest weakness, their inability to think collectively, into their greatest strength. War Commander Thexa Valor experienced something completely unknown to his species as he watched the human fleet tear through his defensive formations. For the first time in Velthari history, doubt began to creep into the collective consciousness. The hive mind had always operated on the principle that superior numbers and technology would guarantee victory, but the humans were proving that principle wrong through tactics that defied all logical analysis. The alien command vessel, a massive ship 10 kilometers long, sat at the center of the formation like a spider in its web. From this position, Thexa Valor controlled every aspect of the battle through direct neural links to his entire fleet. But the chaos created by human unpredictability was making it increasingly difficult to process the flood of information coming from thousands of ships simultaneously. Specialist Kyung-ho Shin piloted his damaged fighter through the heart of the alien formation, his ship trailing atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. His navigation system had been destroyed 20 minutes earlier, forcing him to fly by visual reference alone through a battlefield where energy beams and explosions made visibility almost impossible. Most pilots would have retreated to repair their ship, but Kyung-ho had a different priority. His fighter carried the most advanced sensor package in the human fleet, and he was using it to map the exact positions of every alien vessel between the human attack force and the central command ship. This information was being transmitted in real time to the other human commanders, giving them the tactical intelligence they needed to find the safest path through the enemy formation. All human ships, this is Kyung-ho, he broadcast on the emergency frequency. I have identified a gap in their defensive grid at coordinates 77 Alpha. The path is clear for approximately 90 seconds. Admiral Taeho, commanding the human fleet from his flagship, received this information and immediately passed it to the ships closest to that position. But instead of sending orders through a chain of command, He simply made the information available and allowed each captain to decide independently whether to use it. This decentralized approach meant that some ships could take advantage of the opportunity, while others pursued different tactics based on their local situation. Captain Eugene Lee commanded the destroyer UES Defiant, one of the few ships that had survived the initial assault waves relatively intact. Her vessel had been hit multiple times and was venting atmosphere from several compartments, but her weapon systems were still operational, and her crew remained at their posts. When she received Kyung-ho's intelligence about the gap in the alien formation, she made an immediate decision to exploit it. The Defiant accelerated toward the coordinates Kyung-ho had provided, using the debris field from destroyed ships to mask its approach. Yujin knew that her ship was too damaged to survive much longer in the intense battle, so she decided to use it for maximum effect while she still could. Engineering, I need every bit of power you can give me, Yujin ordered over the internal communication system. Reroute everything from life support and non-essential systems to weapons and engines. Her chief engineer, a veteran named Seok Jin Park, followed the order without question, even though he knew it would make their ship completely dependent on emergency backup systems. The Defiant began to glow with plasma energy as its weapons charged to levels that exceeded all safety specifications. As Eugene ship approached the gap in the alien formation, Velthari vessels began converging on her position. Thex Valor had identified the Defiant as a threat and was directing multiple ships to intercept it before it could reach the command vessel. The alien ships moved with their characteristic perfect coordination, but they were operating with degraded communication systems due to the ongoing audio interference from Dr. Hei In-song's broadcasts. Lieutenant Seungmin Kang piloted a small courier ship that had been pressed into combat service when the battle began. His vessel carried no heavy weapons and minimal armor, making it completely unsuitable for military engagement. However, Seung Min had noticed something during the fighting that gave him an idea for contributing to the battle. The alien targeting systems appeared to have difficulty tracking ships that moved in completely random patterns. Their computers were designed to predict movement based on logical flight paths, but they struggled to lock onto targets that changed direction and speed without any apparent reason. Seung Min's damaged navigation system was actually creating exactly this kind of erratic movement because it was malfunctioning in unpredictable ways. Control. This is Courier Ship 779, Seung Min transmitted. I am experiencing navigation system failure that appears to be confusing enemy targeting systems. Requesting permission to attempt an attack run on the command vessel. The request was so unusual that it took several seconds for anyone to respond. A courier ship attacking the most heavily defended target in the alien fleet was essentially suicide, but the battle had already demonstrated that conventional tactics were not working against the Velthari. Permission granted, 779, came the response from Admiral Taeho himself. Good luck. Seung Min pointed his small ship toward the massive alien command vessel and pushed his engines to maximum power. His malfunctioning navigation system caused the ship to weave and spiral through space in a pattern that was completely unpredictable, making it nearly impossible for the alien defensive systems to target effectively. Behind him, the remains of the human fleet continued their desperate assault on the alien formation. Over 2/3 of the human ships had been destroyed, but the survivors pressed forward with a determination that the Velthari could not understand or counter. Each loss seemed to make the remaining crews fight harder rather than retreat, a response that violated every principle of logical military behavior. Commander Hyunwoo's ship, the Indomitable, had taken severe damage during the advance toward the command vessel. His bridge was filled with smoke from overloaded systems, and he could feel the deck vibrating as his engines operated far beyond their design limits. But his weapons were still functional, and his crew remained at their posts, despite the obvious danger. So-min, what is our status? Hyunwoo asked his tactical officer. We have lost main sensors and 2/3 of our defensive systems, So-min reported while working at a control panel that sparked with electrical discharge. However, our main guns are still operational, and we are within firing range of the Yao command vessel. Hyunwoo looked at the massive alien ship on his damaged display screen. It was larger than anything humanity had ever built, bristling with weapons that could vaporize his ship with a single shot. But it was also the key to victory. If they could destroy or disable the command vessel, the entire alien fleet would lose its coordination. All remaining ships, this is Commander Hyunwoo. He broadcast to the survivors of the human fleet. We are within striking distance of the enemy command vessel. Concentrate all firepower on that target. This is our chance to end this battle. The response came from ships scattered across the battlefield, each one damaged and operating on emergency power, but each one still ready to fight. Captain Yoo-Jin Lee's voice crackled through the static. Defiant standing by, all weapons ready? Lieutenant Sung-Min Kang's transmission was barely audible through the interference. 779 approaching target, request covering fire. Dozens of other voices confirmed their readiness to make what would likely be their final attack. The human fleet had been reduced to fewer than 80 ships, but their crews had learned something important during the battle. They had discovered that their greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers, but their willingness to make individual sacrifices for a cause greater than themselves. Thexveller felt the collective consciousness of his species recoil as he realized that the primitive humans were about to achieve something that should have been impossible. They had fought through his entire fleet using tactics that made no logical sense, and now they were preparing to attack his command vessel with forces that should have been easily destroyed. For the first time in thousands of years, the Velthari, hive mind, experienced an emotion that individual species knew well, but collective consciousness had never encountered: fear. They were afraid of creatures that could make decisions based on something other than logical analysis, beings who could choose to die for principles that existed beyond mere survival. The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and neither side knew how it would end. The final assault on the Velthari command vessel began with Lieutenant Sung-Min Kang's damaged courier ship, weaving through defensive fire that should have destroyed it within seconds. His malfunctioning navigation system created flight patterns so erratic that the alien targeting computers could not predict where his ship would be from one moment to the next. Energy beams that should have vaporized his vessel instead passed harmlessly through empty space as he spiraled toward the massive command ship. Seung-Min's small ship carried only basic weapons, but the plasma modifications that engineer Bo-Ra Kim had developed turned his simple energy cannons into something far more dangerous. As he approached the alien vessel, he pushed his weapons beyond all safety limits, knowing that his ship would likely be destroyed by the energy discharge, but hoping to cause enough damage to help the other human ships. The blast from his overloaded weapons struck the command vessel's hull just as Seung-Min's ship exploded from the feedback. The explosion was small compared to the massive alien ship, but it created something unexpected: a brief disruption in the neural communication network that connected Thexveller to his fleet. For 3 seconds, every Velthari ship lost contact with the Central Command Authority. 3 seconds was not long, but in a space battle it was enough time for human commanders to exploit the confusion. Ships that had been pinned down by coordinated alien fire suddenly found themselves facing individual vessels that were no longer operating as part of a unified force. Commander Hyunwoo seized this opportunity immediately. All ships, concentrate. Fire on the command vessel while their coordination is disrupted, he ordered. The surviving human vessels, fewer than 60 now, turned their weapons toward the massive alien ship and fired everything they had. The combined firepower of the human fleet, enhanced by the unstable plasma modifications, struck the command vessel from multiple angles simultaneously. The alien ship's shields, designed to handle single large attacks, were overwhelmed by dozens of smaller impacts coming from unpredictable directions. Sections of the hull began to buckle under the assault. Inside the command vessel, Thexveller felt something that no Velthari had ever experienced: panic. The hive mind was designed to process information efficiently and make logical decisions, but the random nature of the human attack created too many variables to analyze simultaneously. For the first time in his species' history, their perfect coordination was becoming a weakness rather than a strength. Captain Yoo-Jin Lee's destroyer Defiant had sustained critical damage during the approach to the command vessel, but her crew continued to fight even as their ship fell apart around them. Emergency power was failing throughout the vessel, and several compartments had been completely destroyed by alien weapons fire. Yet Yu Jin and her people remained at their posts, determined to make their sacrifice meaningful. "All hands, this is the captain," Yu Jin announced over the ship's failing communication system. "We have one more shot with the main guns before power fails completely. Make it count." The Defiant's final weapon discharge was aimed at the same section of the command vessel that Seung-min had damaged with his suicide attack. The plasma-enhanced energy beam punched through the weakened hull and penetrated deep into the alien ship's interior, causing secondary explosions that disrupted more of the neural control systems. Thex Valor felt parts of his consciousness disconnect as the control network suffered damage. Hundreds of ships in his fleet suddenly lost their direct neural link to the command authority, leaving them to operate on basic programming that could not adapt to the chaotic human tactics. Admiral Tae-ho, commanding from his flagship at the edge of the battle, watched as the tide of combat began to shift. The alien fleet was still vastly superior in numbers and firepower, but their perfect coordination was breaking down as more ships lost contact with the central command system. Individual Velthari vessels began making tactical errors as they tried to operate independently for the first time in their species' history. Dr. Hai-In Song intensified her audio interference broadcasts, filling the alien communication channels with recordings of human voices, music, and laughter, and the chaotic sounds that had initially confused the Velthari now became a form of psychological warfare, as the hive mind struggled to filter out the noise and maintain control over their remaining ships. Engineer Woo Jin Kim, working in the damaged engine room of the Indomitable, managed to squeeze one final burst of power from his overloaded systems. The ship's weapons charged for what would likely be their last shot, as the plasma modifications had pushed the power systems beyond their breaking point. "Commander," Woo Jin reported to the bridge, "I can give you one more full power shot, but it will destroy our engines. We will be dead in space afterward." "Do it," Commander Hyunwoo replied without hesitation. "Target the command vessel's central section." The Indomitable's final attack struck the Velthari command ship at its most critical point, where the main neural control systems were housed. The explosion that followed sent shockwaves through the massive vessel and severed Thex Valor's connection to over half of his remaining fleet. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the aliens. Thousands of ships that had operated in perfect unity suddenly found themselves isolated, unable to communicate with their central command authority or coordinate with neighboring vessels. Many ships simply stopped moving, their crews paralyzed by the loss of the collective consciousness that had guided every decision for millions of years. Other alien vessels began to retreat, their individual commanders making the logical decision to withdraw rather than continue a battle they no longer understood. The Velthari had never developed the ability to think independently because they had never needed it, and now that weakness was destroying their fleet more effectively than human weapons ever could. Thex Valor, his consciousness fragmented and his control over the fleet broken, made a decision that went against every principle his species had followed for millennia. He ordered a full retreat, abandoning the battle and the conquest of human space rather than risk losing his entire fleet to an enemy that fought in ways the hive mind could not comprehend. The surviving human ships watched in amazement as the alien fleet began to withdraw. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours earlier were fleeing from a human force that had been reduced to fewer than 50 vessels. The victory had cost them over 80% of their fleet, but they had achieved something unprecedented. They had defeated a technologically superior enemy through sheer unpredictability and individual courage. Years later, the Battle of Crimson Fleet became known throughout the galaxy as the engagement that changed interstellar warfare forever. The Velthari, once feared across dozens of star systems, retreated to their home territory and never again attempted to expand their empire. Word of their defeat spread to every known civilization, carrying with it a new understanding of human capabilities. Ji-hoon Kwan, a young military cadet studying at the Earth Defense Academy, learned about the battle from veterans who had survived the fighting. His instructors, many of them former crew members from the ships that had fought against the aliens, taught him that humanity's greatest weapon was not advanced technology or superior numbers, but the chaos that came from billions of individual minds, each capable of making decisions that defied logical prediction. The galaxy had learned to fear human unpredictability, and entire alien civilizations now avoided human space, rather than risk encountering an enemy that could turn apparent weakness into devastating strength. Monuments throughout human territory honored not just the fallen heroes of the battle, but the principle they had died defending. That individual consciousness, with all its beautiful chaos and contradiction, was humanity's greatest gift to a universe that often valued order above all else. The battle had ended, but its legacy would echo through the galaxy for generations to come, reminding all who heard the story that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to follow the rules that everyone else considers sacred. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through conquest or technological superiority, but by proving that the chaotic creativity of free minds could overcome any force that tried to impose perfect order upon the universe.